In this dream, I was with my sister. On the physical level, she won't hear a word about the ears, and on the real side, she often would be rather aggressive when I tried to share it with her there too. More recently, she seems more receptive on the real side, whatever life level version of her I speak with there. She now has a tendency to listen. It just hasn't, as yet, filtered through to her personal physical self. So, on this occasion, in my dream, I was demonstrating to her an array of abilities, perhaps displaying the malleable nature of the real side, and how less restricted we all are, particularly with the connection to our real awareness. I was putting on quite the show, vanishing acts, creating all manner of things before her entertained eyes, moving through what would seem to be solid objects and structures as though I were a ghost. Suddenly, during my little show, a curious window manifested on the wall, for at this moment we were inside a building. Lindsay indicated the window and inquired as to its nature. I did not know, and furthermore, I had the sense it didn't belong here, in this house. It seemed to be of glass. One would assume it, therefore, to be transparent, but yet nothing could be discerned beyond it. She suggested I go and investigate. Instead of clambering through it, physical level style, I elected to fly instead, adding further to my all the exciting things you can do on the real side show. I went through the window and into whatever lay beyond. I landed and took in my surroundings. A dismal and foul setting to behold. A dead, arid, and forbidding landscape, with no life and sinister undertones, rank odours, and swampy underfoot. Well, seemed it was a window to an area of the dismal lower astral then, and looking around, I could see no sign of life. So I decided to return to where Lindsay was waiting on the other side of the window. But my mobility was seriously diminished. I looked to see if I was somehow snared, but could see no evidence of restriction, and yet my movements were hampered, as though I was going in slow motion. Every step an effort. I felt like a Ray Harryhausen stop-motion photography model. Nevertheless, I laboriously made my way slowly back to the window, but something was overcoming me, some kind of a darkness. I was assuming a different form, and it wasn't something you'd see on the cover of Vogue, and with a malignant attitude to match. I proceeded, however, then was stopped in my tracks, for a guide stood there, between where I had managed to advance to and the window. I'm uncertain which guide this was, but had the impression he was one. He raised a hand and proclaimed that I could go no further. I was still in my new and frightful form, and getting more so by the moment, my attitude descending further into darkness. I muttered and hissed, for it was this guide who now prevented my taking another step. He explained how, If I continue back to the window in this current adopted state, I may well pose a threat and a hazard to Lindsay when I return to the house she was waiting in. The guide began to reverse the transition, and I was restored to my former self, and the foul attitudes fell away. I was then able to return through the window. I would awake at this point, but as I did so, one final word reached my ears from the guide. Beware of the dark reptilians. On reflection then, I was sharing with Lindsay in a way that would encourage her, by displaying the liberation that can be experienced through real awareness. The house then was maybe Lindsay's vehicle, as homes tend to be. So attached are people to their personal selves, they reconstruct homes on the real side, and often are in them when we encounter them there. Her receptivity further suggested by the fact that I was allowed inside, whereas on other occasions I have been attacked when entering people's homes, as they saw it as an invasion of their personal space and self-convinced literal constructed selves. Maybe she has some kind of affiliation with the dark forces, maybe unbeknownst to her, as she seemed perplexed as to the window's origin, as we can be programmed by the dark forces and work on their behest at life levels that, unless we are more aware, we wouldn't be aware of, or aware that we were an unwitting agent or being manipulated. I was speaking to Gwen and Peter about how, unless individuals do make the connection to their real awareness, then they can become potentially Callum pawns and used almost like Manchurian candidates, like in the Matrix movie, where anyone still locked in the Matrix can become an agent, even if they are assuming the roles of family members. Seems then, when I agreed to go through the portal window, it was like an agreement to something, and the cause and effect consequences of it potentially taking me down a very dark road indeed. Luckily, help was at hand, a situation I didn't know how to deal with. I'm not sure what would have happened should I have returned to the house in my less than savoury form. My connection to my awareness is not to a degree yet then that I was able to deal with this experience myself, and so a guide came to my assistance. The mention of dark reptilians is interesting, for recently I, Gwen, Peter and Lindsay were nearly attacked by a particular variety of reptilian that the New You song was able to keep at bay on that occasion, where they were trying to transition through onto the physical, as I recounted on a prior UK Skype. I had the sense these were a serious reptilian bunch, not to be trifled with, almost like reptilian special branch, or an elite unit of reptilian assassins. I had the sense the dark reptilians the guide referred to were this same group, and that particular part of the astral I found myself in was their lair. And that's the end of that one.
Another movie, Kevin.
Yes, it was rather a bit long-winded. I didn't realise how much I'd written down as I started reading it.
No, that's terrific. This experience you're having here with this is your sister, Lindsay? And well, you know the situation. Well, you're in this particular area, and this window appears. Well, uh, it's kind of like something that she's saying that, oh, go take a look at it over there or whatever. So she suggests this, and she doesn't know what it is. You don't know what it is. Well, what I'm seeing is that it's like part of her unconscious that she doesn't recognize, and she doesn't recognize the connection she's to. And so you go through the window, right? You go through it, you fly through it, all right, because you're the adventure guy. Of course, it's understandable, like Indiana Jones. We all do that. I do things like that too, and get myself into a particular situation like Indiana Jones. All of a sudden you want to go on the treasure hunt, but all of a sudden there's a lot of situations that come up. And so as you go in there, all of a sudden, like any of us here, we're a product of our environment, aren't we? We really basically are. The personal self, whatever this lifetime entails, we become a product of it. We become associated with it. We agree to it, whatever. Well, it's understandable because we go through the experience and we keep agreeing. So you're in this area, and all of a sudden you start transforming because you like become a product of the environment. This is a good view for you too, to see that, and the guide is there, and you recognize the guidance also, so you heed the guidance. Now, the average person may not recognize that and go back and then bring that in. You see, bring that attitude in to where your sister isn't recognizing this unconscious connection also. So it's kind of along those lines. Again, there's a movie called Forbidden Planet in the 50s, early 60s, and it gives a good demonstration of the id, or the unconscious, how it is. And so because when you're in the real side there, you're also tied to the unconscious part of the individual. So this becomes rather interesting. Also, you have family relationships there too. So you're kind of tied in with things, and you're kind of easily agreeable. One person does one thing, and they may go do something funny, and they're saying, "Oh, come on, let's go do this. Let's etc." And so you do it too, and all of a sudden you guys are in a situation that you wish you hadn't have done, but you thought it would be fun, etc. So, and then later on you talk to your mother, and your mother says something like to you, if your friend said to jump off a bridge, would you jump off it too? That's the old saying that mothers say. And so again, we have this suggestiveness, don't we? And we have these relationships. And in these relationships, things get funny, don't they? So again, this is where the being to being attitude really makes sense with this so-called family idea and relationships. In other words, as I went through the family and I had the daughter, etc., well, I utilized that knowledge so that when my mother passed on, etc., I was totally indifferent to it, because it's being to being, it's her journey. There was no funeral. I didn't weep or whatever, etc., because I knew she was okay. This is what I had learned, so I practiced that. So all I suggest is take a look at this and the family situation, because we've gone through this for lifetimes, and this is what keeps sucking us back. We can have all kinds of real side experiences. We can be with the boys or whatever, but all it takes is one attitude. And it can be and it's usually relationship of some kind. And I've seen it so many times. And I'm not saying this or that, but I'm just saying that here's an objective view to where there is a relationship there, and the individual is having their experience. But if you take part in it, then you become the product of their environment also. You're seeing that. But you decide it, and it doesn't have to be so. So again, I had family, I had friends, I had girlfriends, etc. And the thing is that I let them have their position. I don't agree to it simply because I agree to the is. And so this is where it becomes being to being. And actually, it's better for everybody to go through their own experiences. And realistically, we cannot help someone else. In other words, when the guide comes there, he's giving you a suggestion. Okay, you decide to heed that suggestion or not. most unaware people wouldn't. You heeded the suggestion. In other words, don't go back like that. So you were willing to heed a suggestion. So all of a sudden you were transformed, you see, because again, there's the willingness. As long as you're willing. But if you're not willing, then the guide can't transform you. And if you decided to go back, you're going to pull that in, you see. So there's kind of a view of your experience. But other than that, there's another movie for you. Yes, thank you, Kevin.
Okay, thank you, Dwayne. And I shall move on to my next dream. In this dream, I was accompanied by a friend from the physical, someone I've known a while in this lifetime, and I dare say lifetimes prior to that. He is not at all interested in the new presentation, but has to put up with me speaking about it and all things related regardless if he's in my presence. Anyway, we were in an open area. Nothing very remarkable about it, but we seemed to be seeking something. The thing we sought was located. It was a crashed UFO, half embedded in the ground. There was one thing that set this UFO apart from probably the majority, and that was it was minuscule, like a little toy spaceship. Only we knew it was real. A little hatch was left open, and squinting inside as best as we were able, we saw banks of flicking lights and controls, but no sign of the occupants. Seems they had departed and left the door open. My friend and I began to search for the mini-occupants, and our hunt led us to a small hill with a rocky encave, and standing in that were two tiny people, and we knew these to be the craft occupants. They looked very human, but extremely small, maybe an inch tall, I would say, and they were moving, but incredibly slowly, almost imperceptibly. Communication with them was difficult, but they had some vials of strange amber liquid that they managed to impress upon us the importance of, and gave us the keeping of them. The vials were about their size, and they had been dragging them to their current position. We took the vials into our care, and this was the last we saw of the little people. They no longer featured in the dream. I wanted to reveal the vials to the world, because they seemed to contain great wisdoms or teachings somehow, despite them being just liquid seemingly. But my friend insisted we bury them, and reluctantly I did so, and we concealed them in the ground, and laid brickwork upon them. In the next scene, I was in some future setting, rather a dismal place. It was very dull, and had a very tired, washed-out sense about it, and at a bar I was knocking back whiskey shots at £60 each, roughly translated as about $90. So seemed a rather expensive dismal future. Then my friend from earlier was back, and we were around constant groups of assorted people, ranging from boring to wanting to jump off a tall building tedious. As my boredom of each one-dimensional literal group reached the maximum level that I could endure, I would kind of warp from my position and pass through the building, or wherever it was that this boring situation was occurring, and I would move beyond, but only to find myself with another equally as dull group. I must have done this a while, and proclaimed this the most dreary planet, dimension, or life position ever recorded in the universal files. Then the dream would end. So, on reflection, I took the little people to be our personal little selves, and we, as bigger people, were then quite possibly the real selves. But then the vial of amber knowledge, I felt, was the sharings of the ears. So why was the little selves handing it over to the real selves? Perhaps the journey to the ears was too monumental for the personal selves at this moment, and they were rebuking the opportunity. Then we, the real us, were burying it. So even though the opportunity had been passed over, the seeds of it had been planted in the subconscious. It was buried in the causal body, that one day perhaps might be reignited again and sparked back into life, should such an opportunity cross the path of the personal self again. Or, if you flipped it on its head, you might say the little people were the real selves and trying to get the attention of the personal selves, and why they were so large in comparison was a demonstration of the personal little self being so self-convinced that it thinks it knows better than life itself. It believes in its mind it is bigger than life itself. Either way, with the opportunity rejected, the dreary future lifetimes were waiting around the corner. More unconscious lives in a steadily deteriorating creational matrix, with boring company and expensive whiskey. But seemed I was playing with creational manipulating ability. My warp activities I was displaying, but that ethereal vehicle utilizing would have me face further cause and effect consequences also. Maybe I was a little unduly influenced by this friend of mine, who, as I say, has little interest in anything other than satiating his carnal desires. In the recent past, I have had dreams about him, with clear warnings to not let him trespass too readily into my life. For these friendships we have, if they are not being to being, if they are associations on the physical level, then we can find that we drag each other back into future lifetimes through the emotional attachments we have with them. It's not that we abandon these individuals, but far better to encounter them in the real universes from a position of real being to being, than here in the passing dream. And that ends that dream.
Okay, Kevin. Wow, again, that was excellent, and that's really great demonstration to share, Kevin. How you saw that both sides. Yes, exactly. Sometimes you'll have experiences on the real side where you'll recognize the people, and they're a lot taller than you, and they're kind of looking down on you, and you'll think as you come back to the personal self, sometimes you think, oh gee, well, you know, that's their stature. On the real side, they're bigger than, or they're more aware than I realize. But what that is many times is how you see it, and you saw this one back and forth, which is good. It doesn't matter, you have the awareness to see that, so it's all fine. Actually, many times the experience is demonstrating itself to where they're looking down on you, you see. And again, that's the personal self. And yes, for the most part, this is how people have been indoctrinated. Again, product of their environment. People have been indoctrinated to think that, oh, you know, you go to school, you get your diploma, etc. You go through these things, college, university, whatever, and you're the know-it-all. You know what life is. And, oh, you've got your buddies there, too, if you need them, the scientists, the techies and the scientists, because, you know, they're always bringing up new discoveries about the rocks floating in space, etc. And this is this and this is that. So everybody's self-convinced, aren't they? And easy to manipulate. But no, that was excellent. That whole scene and experience that you went through. Those are great, great something to share. You know, to creatively share, and what you're doing, you're putting it out there in the world. This is where you're the warrior. You're stepping up with this, and you are sharing this. So, yeah, no, that was excellent. Another great movie by Kevin Smith. Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, thank you, Dwayne. And I shall finish with one more. Another robot-orientated dream now. The setting was another very uninspiring and unenviable location. It seemed to be a planet junkyard. Nothing organic met the eyes. No greenery, no animals, no peoples of any kind. Just robots of various sizes and types, marauding and metallically clunking their way around this stark, cold, and metallic world. I was accompanied on this little robot sightseeing excursion with my sister, Lindsay. Must have been a life-level version of her that didn't want to bait me into the lower astral then. Just as well. Or I may have whacked her upside the head with a dismembered robot arm. For yes, robot parts were scattered about. Seems the robots were not all friendly, and were as quarrelsome as any other species. If you ever saw that comic series Zoids, many of the robots had that kind of appearance and flavour about them, especially with the evident conflict amongst their kind. Indeed, a great many of them looked very much like mechanical versions of all different kinds of animals. There was even one particular robot who would trundle about and gather up all the broken and abandoned robotic debris, like a scavenger, reconstruct and reprogram them into a kind of personal robotic army. The results were as you might imagine, not the most glorious and resplendent recreated robots. It was a little like a robotic version of the Frankenstein story out here. Then the scene switched. I was now with Gwen, my mother. I was setting her a mission, a task. She was to gather and collate information on the reptilians. If it was something particular I sought, or just general information, I don't recall. But she accepted her assignment willingly, and executed it admirably, positively excelling expectation, as she returned with arms full of data, details, and photographic evidence of reptilians, their devious plots, their anti-human intentions. Also, information regarding those reptilians that were of the opposite inclination, those tired of creation and wanting new positions, and to avoid the phantom zone. With the information acquired, We were going to reveal it to the world, share it with all, and the dream concluded. So, once again, I am on my adventures. I am earning my way through the experiences that I have. The worlds I explore, the individuals I encounter and interact with, becoming more and more aware until I am no longer the effect of my unawareness. A peek then at a world or dimension with a very robotic theme. Seemed I'm either encountering reptilians or robots, chiefly with my escapades. Maybe it's the future of this planet that I saw. Maybe another world that went along similar mechanical lines. A little like the last Skype, where there were robots. And Dwayne suggested that it was a demonstration of individuals who had been so self-convinced, so rigidly literalized, that layers upon layers of self-limiting rigidity, through limiting life choices, had resulted in them becoming frozen and robotized. And still they are fighting amongst themselves, adding yet further layers to their created consciousnesses. I wonder how much more rigid they may become. Is there a level even less to aspire to than a rigid robot? Maybe a stationary robot. Maybe a kitchen appliance or a refrigerator will be the individual's next position then, as their awareness continues to constrict. And seems Lindsay, my sister, was along for the experience too. A promising sign indeed. Maybe I wanted to impress upon her, or her real self wanted to impress upon her personal self, the kind of world or dimension she may find herself in. A little shock to spur her into a consideration of the new presentation and the is, maybe. And Gwen too. I set her an objective, invited her to partake of an experience, and she accepted. She is more than willing then to go through the process too. With a nudge or two, she agreed to the mission. And so, while on her data gathering task, she would have had all kinds of reptilian-orientated entanglements, I have no doubt. Getting stuck in and earning her awareness too. Maybe some of what she encountered will filter through in the weeks to come, and we may hear of her daring exploits. That's the end of that one.
Well, again, excellent. That was really good, Kevin. Yes, and yeah, the being is very important, and yes, you have to be careful how self-convinced you become, because all of a sudden you may wake up and find yourself as a toaster one day, right? Yeah. Yes, and this is where we're headed, right? You're kind of looking at the future. Yes, all possible. There can be things coming in which got a surprise for everybody, but yes, in the meantime, it can be anything. And we've got, what do we have? Smart appliances now. Okay, are these smart appliances smarter than people? Well, there's going to be some competition, isn't there, with the self-convinced person and the smart appliances. Of course, the smart appliances attack you. All right, so people got to wake up. This is where we're coming into 5G and more than that. But that was very good. Refrigerator, toaster, whatever, microwave. Yes, it's all here, and it's to better understand what's really going on. You're one of the agents there, like James Bond, secret agent, and you're going over the reptilians, and you're bringing your mom in, etc. And you want to understand what the world is really consists of. It's not only mountains and hills and freeways and buildings, but what's behind all of this, and not just to pretend anymore, but to see it for what it is. So yes, it's quite an adventure to get through creation. Otherwise, we stay self-absorbed, and you just go through the routine again. So yes, a person can take on all these layers of misunderstanding, misconception, being self-convinced. They can do that. And at a certain point, they're given the opportunity to wake up, and they can get through it. And all that they've experienced can be an asset once they learn to recognize it properly. It can be a very good reference. And for the most part, of what not to do. We need that reference too, of what not to do. So this is where we take the risk and step in to do whatever it takes to have the experience, to also see that also, you see? So just going back to your dad's, Peter's experience there in the beginning, he was willing. And, just that willingness in a strange place, etc., to go through it, then all of a sudden objectively see, oh, that is not what I want. You need all of that to sort it out, to recognize the real you better and better each time. Yes, thank you, Kevin.